The shooting death of Michael Brown has been framed by much of the media as another example of an unarmed African American being brutally murdered by a white police officer. This narrative has been hijacked by the establishment to foment racial division and tension between blacks and whites. There's no doubt that black people in America are indiscriminately targeted by police in acts of brutality that occur on a regular basis, but the Michael Brown shooting clearly does not represent such an example. Evidence considered by the grand jury which led to the acquittal of Officer Darren Wilson clearly indicates that Michael Brown, a thug who had written rap lyrics advocating violence and who had robbed a convenience store shortly before the incident, punched Darren Wilson in the face multiple times, tried to grab his gun and pulled the trigger, meaning he was not unarmed, and then aggressively charged him. Evidence also points to the fact that Brown did not have his hands up in surrender when he was shot, discrediting the entire foundation of the hands up, don't shoot grievance. This account is based on forensic proof, ballistics and autopsy evidence, as well as testimony from black eyewitnesses. The grand jury heard 3 months worth of expert testimony and evidence, studied the results of 3 autopsies, reviewed over 1,000 pages of documentation and heard from 60 eyewitnesses. Despite knowing that such a decision would inevitably cause mass rioting and looting in Ferguson and possibly other areas, the grand jury still refused to bow to that pressure and made a decision not even to bring Officer Wilson to trial based on the overwhelming evidence that he was not guilty of manslaughter or murder. These facts clearly exonerate Wilson and verify his account of the incident. Michael Brown's death was tragic, but Wilson clearly acted in legitimate self-defense. Anyone who actually studies the evidence cannot come to any other conclusion unless they're being willfully naive or lying.
These are the facts. And if you are upset by facts, if you are upset by evidence, then you have no place in public discourse. If you are upset and offended by evidence, then you need to not talk about this to anyone except your imaginary friends and hand puppets, because you don't know how to have a discourse about reality. To be offended by facts is to be crazy.
So why has the Obama administration, the political establishment and the media seized upon this incident and completely ignored the facts to push their own distorted agenda? Why did Barack Obama label grievances at the grand jury's decision legitimate and understandable, giving the green light for looters and criminals to run riot based on a completely illegitimate justification? Why did Time magazine publish an article entitled "Ferguson in Defense of Rioting," despite the fact that the majority of stores burned to the ground in Ferguson were black-owned businesses? Why has the establishment and the media contrived to spark a national conversation about white-on-black violence when 93% of blacks in America are killed by other blacks? Why is there no discussion about FBI crime statistics which show that black arrests for manslaughter and murder are virtually the same as white arrests, despite black people making up just 12% of the population compared to over 70% for whites? Why is there no debate about the fact that blacks commit 7 to 10 times the amount of violent crime compared to whites per capita? Is it because of the colour of their skin? No. It's a myriad of factors from culture to socioeconomics, none of which are being discussed as a result of us being forced to swallow this false narrative.
We have so many dead black bodies in this country, Megan, not because cops are shooting them, but because other black people are shooting them. And the left is selling a false narrative out there, pretending that the opposite is true. Blacks are arrested at the same rate that victims of crimes identify blacks as their assailants. This is not about blacks are in, or cops are in these communities because that is where the 9/11 calls originate. And they are largely there stopping blacks from harming one another.
The sad reality is that the problem of violence in black society and the facts behind the Michael Brown shooting have been universally ignored by protesters and rioters who have hijacked the case as an excuse to cause mayhem and carry out looting. And they've been aided by the media and the political establishment, which has tacitly approved this reaction by crafting a phony narrative to provide the justification for it. Why is the establishment propagating this false narrative? Because it only serves to discredit legitimate opposition to the very real problem of police brutality, while taking our very real frustrations over government corruption and abuse and sending them down an irrelevant racial rabbit hole. If blacks and whites are continually at each other's throats, we can never unify to face our true oppressors. The state, the same state that keeps black people in a cycle of dependency which contributes to the poor socio-economic conditions that lead to violence and criminality in black society. This is about divide and conquer, and we're all being conned. This is an attempt to hijack and subvert the American distemper which threatens to derail the existing political system. Just think about how this will be received by Americans. Not only will conservative Americans now extrapolate this case and use it to dismiss genuine examples of police brutality, but the authorities themselves will feel more justified in beefing the police state as an appropriate response to the chaotic scenes witnessed this week, which again, were all based on a complete misunderstanding or a willful ignorance of the facts in the Michael Brown shooting. Whereas the hundreds of cases of egregious police brutality directed against people of all colours every year are routinely ignored or forgotten by the mainstream media and political leaders, the race baiters only ever direct African Americans to get excited about ambiguous or outright justifiable cases like Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown. Why is that? It's because this act of misdirection succeeds in fooling activists, social justice campaigners into throwing their efforts behind lost causes, while convincing the majority of Americans that people who complain about police brutality are ignorant, stupid, biased, and even violent. That is the true narrative behind the Michael Brown shooting and the Ferguson riots, and it's one that the media and the political establishment, for their own reasons and agenda, will refuse to tell you about. Check out the other videos, subscribe to the channel. I'm Paul Joseph Watson reporting for Infowars.com.